I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with the word permaculture before, but I'm kind of one of those dirt ninjas, I guess you could say. By trade, I'm not trained in agriculture or gardening, anything professionally along those lines. I'm just an 11th degree dirt ninja, I guess you could say. So I spend all of my time that I possibly can outside. During the day, I teach at a small school called the Daniel Academy on 106th and Warrenall. It's a pre-K school through 12th grade. And we do a permaculture class with our students to teach them about sustainable agriculture. And we're transitioning our Bethlehem stable style grounds of our school into an edible food forest where kids can go shopping for their vegetables for their lunches and put them on a plate and take them to lunch with them. A couple years ago, I was introduced to this concept of permaculture or permanent agriculture and was really fascinated by it for two reasons. One, because I'm in the world of academe, so I love science and research, and one of the things that I've noticed that in the natural health and wellness world, there is some really good research and there's some really good amounts of tree hugging, not so much research that really doesn't give it anything concrete. And so when I started looking at permaculture, I started noticing most of the people were the hippie type that just tried something out in their own yard with anecdotal evidence and didn't really study the real science behind it. And I love both of those worlds. So by day, I have a button-up shirt on and a tie. At night, I get home and I am with chickens and dirt under my fingernails and hugging my own trees in my backyard, not literally, just figuratively. And so I love the balance of those worlds, but I don't want to be so open-minded that my brain falls out. I love the beauty of science and the way that God has created science and nature to be in harmony with one another. And they really don't have to be in competition. They really can go together. And I think that's what's so beautiful about doing things today on Earth Day, is we can actually celebrate what the Lord is doing, not only in our community, but also in our own backyards. And that's why I so was drawn to permaculture, because when I first saw the videos by a guy named Jeff Lawton out of Australia at Zaytuna Farms in Australia, which is where I did my permaculture design course, I really became fascinated by the fact that I could possibly get rid of my grocery bills in some way. And so for me, to be honest, I'm looking at the end goal going, man, I want to drop costs and I want to save money. Now, if you've gardened for more than 5 seconds, you know that is not as easy as what it sounds. And it does require time and it does require energy. But for me, what I found is gardening in my own backyard is a lot like business. We often start at the top instead of starting at the bottom and working our way up. And so in business, a lot of times what people do is we focus on, I want to have this much money, I want to have this much income, I want it to produce these kind of things so I can have this kind of house, this kind of life, and this kind of retirement. And then we realize it's a lot of work to get to those results. And gardening is very much the same way, is that we often go spend $300 in a growing season to buy all these incredible plants that we have no idea what to do with. And then about 2 months into the summer, they're all dead in our backyard. Why? Because you live in Kansas City, Missouri, and it's hot, and so we get frustrated, and then we give up on gardening till a couple years later when we find another really great article and we go spend $300 more that add to the already burnt plants that are still sitting in the same pots in our shed from 3 years prior. I don't know about you, but I have gone on that cycle one too many times and with one too many paychecks. And this is that time of year where we tend to make those type of mistakes. And instead of starting at the ground and working our way up to a fruitful place, we oftentimes do the opposite. So instead of telling you primarily what you should be harvesting in the next 3 to 6 months, I want to tell you how to start from the ground and build your way up. Because if you start there and take a year or two just simply to repair, It's a lot like doing natural health in that sometimes you have to detox before you can rebuild. You have to get rid of some of the stuff before you can build your way up from there. So I am a teacher, obviously by trade, so I did bring a handout, and I will be going in numerical order because that's how I roll. So hopefully I want to give you a little bit of what is possible before I tell you how you can get there in your own backyard, because it really doesn't take a 10-acre property or a huge farm or a lot of equipment to be able to do it. Some of it they're just things that you could find foraging out on nature hikes in the woods behind your house, and it really can be that simple. So a couple of the 3 concepts that for me are the why behind why I do gardening in my backyard, and specifically with permaculture. Number 1 is the concept of edible food forests. And to give you a picture of what this looks like, there's 2 places in California that are on my list this summer to go and visit because I've seen them on TV, I've read articles about them, and I'm fascinated by what they have going. They're 35-year-old properties that are subdivisions. And one of the subdivisions has 700 homes in the subdivision that you sign up for a homeowners association. Now, what's unique about that? I'll tell you. So the first thing is that they are 75% fully off-grid. So they either have solar panels on their homes, they have wind energy in their backyards. Now, what I think is absolutely insanely awesome is that they have a nature trail that goes through their subdivision where people eat 80% plus of their own produce. They don't go shopping. And it's all within their neighborhood. So when you need tomatoes, when you need, they have avocados because it's California, or your oranges or pomegranates, they go to their backyard and they pick and they eat. In the last 5 years, they've had so much surplus in their backyards, they started donating to the community because they couldn't even give it away. It was starting to rot on the ground. They had a truckload of figs that they were sending me pictures of in our permaculture class, and I'm going, I just want a bucket of those figs, and they're rotting on the ground, and they're going, come and get them, it's free, come to our backyards. And people sign up for this stuff, and they buy houses in those neighborhoods. Now, if they can do it in California, the drought capital of the world, possibly the universe, surely we can do something remotely close to that in Kansas City. And I don't think that that is just possible. I think it's probable. I think it's very, very doable that we can do that. Now, you've walked on the dirt in your backyard, or dare I say concrete in your backyard, and it's hard in Kansas City to grow stuff. And that's one of the biggest mistakes that we make is we dig off all of our grass and we try and plant in that, which is more dirt than it is actually soil that has living organic matter in it. But if we start down there and then take a few easy steps to build that back up, you can grow anything. Literally anything. I have friends here in Missouri that are growing citrus in Missouri where it snows. Not in greenhouses, not in hoop houses, which seems ridiculous and impossible, but they're really doing it, and they're actually very successful at it. One of them is downtown in Kansas City in our city limits that you can go and visit and take a tour of a mini citrus orchard. And they've been trying it out for about 8 years, so they're pretty successful at it. Now, some of us kill things in about 8 weeks, but they've got 8 years on citrus trees, which is beautiful. So you really can grow things that are daring, a little bit cutting edge with this food forest concept. Now, for me, I love the food, but the bottom 2 reasons are the ones that I really love, especially that middle one. Number 2 is family and young adult connections. You get to do it with people. That should be, for anybody, the number 1 reason why we do anything is really to connect with people. It doesn't matter at the end of the day how much we have retired with, what's in our bank accounts, or the number of toys that we have. If it's by ourselves, what's really the point in it? What's the point if you have this incredible backyard and it's not filled with voices and with laughter and with great conversations and those intimate connections with people and with our neighbors? Now, our culture has changed. We don't live anymore in a society where we know the last names of our neighbors. Now, that seems scary, but that really is true. I mean, sometimes we go, I don't even know if I know the first name of my neighbor, let alone their last name or where they work or what are they good at. To know those kind of details is rare, but I'll tell you what, things happen in a garden. when you just get together with people and you take your business tie off at the end of the day and you play in dirt together and you get dirt under your fingernails and you're out there with kids, and honestly, they kill stuff and they trample stuff, but it's a blast. I'd rather have 4 gardens of dead flowers with broken stems than 20 beautiful gardens at this point in my life, because I love the sound of kids. I love the sound of neighbors and of the families coming over. And to me, that's what makes me feel alive. And yes, it does help save money, and I can earn a little bit of income on the side doing the agriculture stuff. But I want to be healthy. And that means healthy relationships in as much as it means a healthy diet, a healthy input or an output from my soil. So within permaculture, there are 4 key principles that I want to give you that Jeff Lawton uses, Sepp Holzer used, or some of the founders of permaculture back in the mid-70s. The first is earth care, people care, and fair share. Meaning, number 1, we care for the earth and the environment. We care for the people that are around us. And fair share means you actually make money. You don't go in debt in the process. And whenever you're doing something with either natural health or with business or with earth care, it should be beneficial if you're doing it right. If it's not beneficial and you're not showing fruit, you're probably not doing something right. And so stop and start over. The second one is to think from the ground up. Think soil first, and then what you can add into that soil to get out of it. Now think about the typical American front yard. Green grass. Well, or dead grass in some of our yards. Green grass, which exists nowhere in nature. Even if you look at the great prairies and the fields of old that were filled with buffaloes, there's Echinacea purpurea, there's the Rudbeckia family, there's all these other flowers and grasses and legumes that are in this incredible polyculture, multiple plants in one place, that make up that environment. A single species environment like the dream American front yard simply does not exist anywhere in nature. It doesn't exist. And so what's interesting is we've been trying for the last 75 years to create something that does not exist. It really doesn't exist. And how do we get it to exist? Fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, other sides, and this incredible cocktail. But ironically, when you add one, you have to add the other later. Because if you fertilize, then that weakens the microbes that are in the soil. So then you have to add something else to build up the right microbes. So then you've got to add a fungicide, because if that gets out of balance, then you've got powdery mildew, you've got different molds and other unhealthy bacteria that come in, and that creates a problem with other insects that are starting to come in. So now you need an insecticide, and it's like this cycle that is ongoing. Why to have the perfect American front yard? I'd rather eat my front yard than look at it. I don't know about you, but mowing is hard. And there's not a whole lot of reward in it. I mean, I can play Frisbee in it, but I can play Frisbee in a clover field. I don't need a green grass front yard. I'd rather have clover that only grows that tall that I only have to mow twice a season. That's way easier for me than doing that green grass front yard. And so I think what happens when we start to look at things differently is we look at things differently. Why do I have to have that? What does it matter if my front yard is in those perfect cross-hatched rows? And I was definitely that guy, doing the checkerboard. I'm slightly OCD in my personality, so it had to be north to south and east to west lines. So that way when you walked by the yard, it kind of changed slightly as you were walking by the yard. Who thinks of that? I do. So number 3, to build and establish connections between elements. Find things that benefit one another. Whether that is planting a nasturtium that I saw that Courtney had over here next to your tomatoes so that it becomes a living insect trap. And it draws in beneficial insects that are going to kill off the tomato hornworms. Or it's finding connections between your rain barrels and what you can grow over top of your rain barrels to keep them shaded so that way the water doesn't go stagnant. But creating those healthy connections in your environment is the same thing that we do outside that we do inside our body. So whether that is drinking kombucha to create a healthy body ecosystem so that you can have more energy, clearer skin, so that your eyes can see clearer, or it's planting nasturtiums next to your tomatoes. Those healthy connections are what create an ecosystem, a healthy ecosystem. And then the fourth one is to turn problems into solutions. My latest problem that is now my solution is the bane of dandelions. I have dandelions everywhere at our school. They are everywhere. And we had been trying to get these kids to take these stupid sticks and dig up these dandelions. And if you leave like that much of the root, the stupid things grow back all the time and you just cannot get rid of them. Well, I've started to realize that one of my chicken's favorite foods happens to be dandelions, which is awesome because that problem that I've had, now that I'm taking my electric fence, putting it around that little garden area where I need it to be weeded, I let the chickens loose in there for a day, and all of a sudden the first thing that they go after are all of the dandelions. And then that's not only beneficial because they're weeding for me, it's free fertilizer because, poop happens. And then the second part is they're tilling up my soil. They're getting it ready for me to go in right behind them and plant things in this perfectly tilled soil. And then at the end of the day, I'm saving money on chicken feed. So that stupid problem that I had is actually a really brilliant solution. It's a solution for some other problem. Now, some of those could be the problems of weeds in your ditch that actually bring in the butterfly population. And by being able to find those little solutions to big problems, we can find that we can make a pretty big difference. So what I'd like to do for a few minutes is to give you just 10 really practical, really easy things that you can do in your own backyard, wherever you're at in the process of growing anything in your backyard, to take a step in a good direction. Now, I call it permaculture, but honestly, a lot of permaculture principles, it's common sense, or what used to be common sense to our grandparents or our great-grandparents that now we're rebranding as this new revolutionary idea when it's really just chickens, So, I mean, seriously. So I want to give you a couple really practical things. I did bring up some tomatoes. They're a little wilted and they're very small because our kindergartners helped plant them. So some of the trays have ones that actually grew. Some of the spaces have ones that didn't grow very well. That's because they poked their finger all the way to the bottom of the plug, but they were really happy to be able to give them to you. So if you'd like some of the tomatoes, they're all heirloom. Most of them are labeled. Some of them are not, because I would rather do them with kindergartners who mess them up than do it myself and have them look a certain way. So if you want to help yourself to some heirloom tomatoes, I think they put in a couple curly kale in there as well. Most of them are labeled, but they are all heirloom tomatoes, which essentially means that the DNA of that tomato has not been changed since before World War I. So they're not going to be your fancy red tomatoes that you get in the supermarket. They're going to be multicolored in stripes. Some will be purple and some will be green, and so zebra stripes. So there's a lot of just really strange looking tomatoes in there. But I do want to give you some practical things that you can do. And honestly, choose one. Just choose one. Don't worry about trying to go through my checklist of all 10 because you're probably not going to get there. But you could do one. You can take one step in the right direction that will take you about 5 minutes when you get home. So if one sounds easiest for your yard, do the one thing in your backyard. So the first one is increase organic input by emulating nature. Now let me tell you a really, really easy way that you can do this. So number one, in the fall, when you spend all that time raking up your leaves and bagging them and putting them out to the road, stop it. Put a pile in your backyard in a good sunny spot. Put a couple of shipping crates, or not shipping crates, the pallets around them, and make a little box and start making your own compost. Instead of throwing your apple cores away, throw it on the pile. Now, yes, we've all read the websites that talk about how many times you turn the pile and it has to be as moist as a damp sponge. And there's all these things you have to do to make compost perfect. But what I found is imperfect compost still works. It still works. And sometimes I forget about my compost for a really long time, like a year. And then I go back and I find out the top half is terrible, but the bottom half is black gold. And so even in my neglect, which is one of my spiritual gifts, even in my neglect, I did something right along the way. and it actually helps. And so what I started to do is I started to ask my neighbors across the road. We have this, he's 54 years old, his name is Danny, he has autism, and he sits out at the road every day and waves, and he rakes all of the neighbors' leaves, and he puts them in bags every year. So I started to say, Danny, do you want to just take those in my backyard and dump them on the compost pile? And I mean, last year I had compost piles as tall as I was back into the state land that goes behind my house, but you should see the soil that's being created there, and it's free and it's curbside. So that's one really easy way to have input. What do I do with the compost? Well, once it starts to get crumbly and look like dirt and not stinky, sprinkle it on the top of your flower beds. You know, bury your plants in it. It's not soil yet, but sprinkle it on the top of your pots. Sprinkle it on the top of your flower beds. Don't worry about raking it in and tilling it in with a tiller. Just sprinkle it on the top because it's honestly, it's easier, but that's how nature does it. Is it just drops it on the forest floor. Nobody goes into the forest every year and plows the forest up. It takes care of itself. And it might take some time. It may take longer than a 3-week composting cycle, but that's okay. It really does work. And there's actually outside, it's kind of a first come, first serve. I brought 4 big coffee bags full of compost that is done. We've inoculated it with mycorrhizal fungi, which is incredible for your plants, really great for your body. And I could go on about mycorrhiza for a long time, but it's been inoculated with this beautiful soil mushroom and lots of chicken poop. So it's great for your garden. Sprinkle it on the top of your pots if they need a little bit of refreshing, just a little bit. So there's 4 bags out front, so it's kind of a first come, first serve. Another thing you can do really easily in Kansas City is bring in wood chips. Number 1, they're free. Most places that you call, whether it's Ashplund that's local here or wherever, they will drop off a load, like a dump truck load, about 5 cubic yards of the wood chips for free. And they'll dump it in your driveway and it will make a mess, but it's great to put on top of your flower beds. It reduces the amount of watering that you do. Now don't just sprinkle it on like this, do like 4 inches. That's way more than 4. Do like 4 inches of wood chips or 6 inches of wood chips on the top of your garden, because by the end of the year, it'll be that 1 inch that you wanted it to be anyway. And it's free. Reduces watering, reduces the amount of weeding that you have to do. Lord knows we can all use more time. So there's so many beautiful benefits, and you're bringing in that awesome organic matter into your property that wasn't on your property before. We did it this last year. We had 13 dump trucks full of wood chips brought onto our school property, and we're starting to do these wood chip rings around them, not volcanoes or mountains around them, but just nice rings of wood chips. And we started like with 12 inches last year. It's already decomposed and it's only about 3 inches, and it hasn't even been 1 year yet. So, but it's free, it's local, and almost any tree service will drop them off for free. The city of Kansas City, if you call Kansas City Power and Light, you can get on their website and actually order it. They'll give every residence 1 load of wood chips per year for free. So it's a really easy way to just get those resources that are local, that people are putting out to their road, that they're taking away and shipping somewhere else. I'd rather they ship it into my yard. So it's an easy way to increase organic matter in your own yard. So the second thing that you can do is to reduce chemicals and additives. Now, I am a firm believer in science, and sometimes science is needed to help us get over the hump. Now, for example, in cases of depression or anxiety, sometimes prescription medication is great to get us over the hump. However, I was not created with a lack of Prozac in my body. So there are many other natural things that I can do once I get over that hump to either wean myself off or to build my body, so I don't need those things anymore. Now, am I a physician? No, I'm a teacher and I'm a gardener. But I love looking at plain, simple, anecdotal evidence, which means I've just tried it in my backyard. So let me give you an example. There's this awesome bush called a serviceberry bush. They get these beautiful clusters of white flowers on them. And serviceberry, Juneberry, Saskatoon, they're all over the US. They go by the same name. And this plant will grow 8 to 12 feet tall, big, beautiful clusters of flowers in the springtime. And they get these big berries on them. The birds love them. I can make jam out of them. There's lots of things that you can do with them. Now, I planted a series of these Saskatoon bushes on one of the sides of our school property building to see what I could do without using the fertilizers and that sort of thing around the trees. And so on one of them, I left it totally plain. I planted it by itself, and I planted a few flowers around the base. The next one over, about 6 to 8 feet over, I planted one of a plant called comfrey. Now comfrey, there's one strand of it called the Bocking 14 strand that won't spread like crazy by seed because you'll never get rid of it ever. Comfrey is this incredible plant the Greco-Romans used to use called bone knit or bone heal, because when you crush it up and you put it on a bone, a ligament, or a joint, it actually increases the healing process of the body for those joints. And so there is actual evidence. The University of Baltimore, Maryland did a scientific study that was a double-blind case study. So this is a real study, not tree hugger science. So did a real study that it increased about 24 to 35% in the healing process of bones, ligaments, and joints. And so what they started to do with this plant called comfrey is a process called chop and drop, also known as lazy man gardening. So because it gets to be this big mass of just leaves and bell-shaped flowers, a couple times a year, like 4 or 5 times a year, I chop mine off and I let it go. I just drop it. It's free mulch. It's free compost. The neat thing about comfrey is it can get, even in Missouri, up to an 8-foot taproot down into the soil, that it brings up all of those micronutrients, brings up minerals, brings it up into the leaves, and when you drop it on the top of your soil, that becomes bioavailable for your plants. So it's a free mulch that you're getting all of these deep soil nutrients, and it lays on the top. Now, there is some science that they're doing a 10-year study on comfrey. One of my friends is actually the head of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, studying cover crops for real big agriculture, and they're studying the use of comfrey in these agricultural fields, and they're finding that it works. Now, I don't have the ability at a K through 12 school to do a scientific study, so I did my own study. So I did one of the Saskatoons with no comfrey, one with 1, one with 2, one with 3. Here's how I tested it. I planted them and I let it go because I'm lazy. And then when I went back this year, this is year 3, the one that had no comfrey plants underneath, and mind you, it's the same soil. We tested the soil, the NPK in the soil. We've tested the microorganisms. Everything is the same. The amount of daylight, sunlight, moisture, etc. So when we looked at the one with none, single stalk tree, looks fairly healthy. It's about 8 foot tall now with some branches on the side. It did get fruit. The one that had 1 had about 4 or 5 new shoots that are growing off of it around the side. Skip to the end of the line that we planted 3 comfrey plants around. This tree is gargantuan. It's 3 times the size of the one that had none. It's got 24 shoots that are coming off of it, and you should see the load of berries that are on this tree. It is absolutely unreal. So last year we gave our biology teacher, her name is Deb Callow, so she's a nurse. She used a bricks reading machine that is called a refractometer that looks through the juice of the berries to see the nutrient density, the sugar densities, and a few other things, and it gives a good rating. Now, if you were to buy Saskatoons at a store like Whole Foods, which we did and we tested with a biology class, the bricks rating was about 4 or 5. When you tested the ones in our yard that had no comfrey or 1, they got about a 7 or an 8. The comfrey plants that had 2 to 3 to 4 of those around them, the Saskatoon berries, had 12 to 16 on a brick scale, which is 4 times higher than the ones you would buy at Whole Foods, which is amazing because I didn't do anything different besides put them comfrey plants in the ground. In about 5 minutes, 2 times a year, I went whoosh, whoosh, and I'm done. And it was that easy. And it was free pollination, just simple little things that I didn't fertilize it. I didn't use my herbicides. I didn't use foliar sprays, none of that kind of stuff. Could I have? Sure, I guess I could have. But that's just a lot of time. It's a lot of energy. I'm all about that chop and drop and walk away and let it go. Let the comfrey regrow, and then I do it all over again because I'm lazy. But I also like those berries that have lots of energy and nutrients in them. Did you have something?
Where did you get that strain or whatever you call it, number 14?
Yeah, Bocking 14, there's a lot of places you can get them online. Just type in Bocking 14 online. The other strains of comfrey, most of them come from Russia. This one is a Ukrainian variety of comfrey. The ones that are Russian drop seed and they spread like crazy. And you'll never get rid of it unless you have pigs. It's the only thing that can get down that deep to get comfrey out. Because if you leave a little microscopic piece of a comfrey plant, it is going to come back and with a vengeance. But the Bocking 14 does not spread by seed. We've had it this is our 3rd year with it, and it's the exact same size as it was our 1st year. So it's Bocking, B-O-C-K-I-N-G, Bocking. Yeah, it's called the Bocking 14 variety, yeah.
The Saskatoon berries are from the serviceberry tree, right?
Serviceberry, yep. It's all the same plant, Saskatoon, serviceberry, Juneberry. Just depends on where you're from in the country. So if you're from Saskatchewan, it's a Saskatoon berry. So serviceberries in the Midwest, or Juneberries if you're a little further east, because they ripen in June there. But it's all the same basic species. There's a lot of other varieties of them that you can get, but here they're so cheap. I know you can go to Heartland. They've had them at Heartland before. They're source for them usually is a guy named Phil Robertson, not the Duck Dynasty guy, but same name. So Phil Robertson out at Crit Site in Belton, which now does wholesale to the general populace. So you can get them, really inexpensively there, or come to my school, take a couple cuttings and grow your own. So you can do that. It'll just take you a little bit longer. Yeah.
When you cut it back, do you leave like an inch or so above the ground?
To be honest, I don't even measure, because
Okay,
I just take my it's a little rice cutter and I just pull it across the bottom.
It doesn't really matter how low.
No, it just comes back, and it's so prolific. Within about 2 weeks, it's already, this tall. The leaves are about this big. They're almost the texture of like a borage leaf, like the shape of a hosta leaf, but a little bit picky. But you won't get the slivers like you do from borage in it. So it's almost like a lamb's ear kind of a texture. And the flowers are almost like a bluebell kind of shaped flowers, pink and white stripes. I think the flowers are just as pretty as anything else, and they are really great pollinators, actually. So
They attract a lot of bees.
they do attract a lot of bees. So if you have bee allergies or children, watch what area you're putting them in.
Did you say that you could get the Juneberry or the
Saskatoon.
what are we talking about here? The
Comfrey.
Bocking 14. Did you say you could get that from Heartland?
Heartland, I don't think has the Bocking 14 comfrey. The serviceberry you guys have carried before, but I don't know if you do this year.
Serviceberry, not the.
Right. Yeah. So the Bocking 14 comfrey you can get online. You can actually eBay or Amazon, as it's really cheap to get them. Yeah, but make sure you get Bocking 14 or you will be coming to punch me in the face later, because they'll spread. They will really, really spread. So you like it spread. If you've got area to do it, let it spread. Oh, it's gorgeous. In ditches or on the edges of fields. I mean, it's so abundant on the edge of fields, and then you can just plow it along the edge, but they're stunning.
I put the leaves in compost tea.
Yeah, you can soak them in a 5-gallon bucket and make your own compost tea. Great foliar spray to spray on your plants. So because of the nutrient density, it'll be a really quick green up. So if you know you have company coming over in a couple weeks, do a comfrey tea and you spray it on your plants and everything greens up really, really fast. Great deceiver. Yeah.
So it grows wild here, right? Comfrey?
Yeah, it grows in nature, so you can find it. If you want to come to the school, you can grab a piece of root. You need a piece of a root about 1/4 of an inch, and then that will get you started.
Does it-
I've come and dig some up, but it's not sabaki.
Does it go
Yeah.
by another name?
Comfrey, bone knitter, bone heel, if you're in Europe, but comfrey is what it goes by here. So, yeah. So number 3 in your notes, to transfer different maintenance types of unused areas in your yard. Let me give you a couple examples. So for ground covers, and I have an example here of grass. Instead of growing grass, let me give you a couple really easy alternatives. Number 1 is clover. Now clover is a great pollinator. It stays short. Specifically, if you go to a deer feed store, you can get white clover that spreads everywhere. Now, what's funny is in our yards, we get frustrated in the summer because our grass turns brown and the clover stays green. But why do we get mad at the clover and try and kill the clover off and plant more of the grass that just dies anyway? just stick with the clover, and the clover is great. You can get it in white and in yellow. I have red and crimson that I'm going to try out this year, so that will self-seed itself over time. But instead of me fighting this uphill battle, I'm just going to enjoy the uphill battle and just walk it out and enjoy it. Great pollinator if you have chickens. It's awesome chicken feed. There's a couple places downtown in Westport that have transferred their front yards or transformed their front yards into thyme and oregano front yards. So they let their front yard die. They bought on Amazon bulk thyme and oregano seed, and they spread it just like grass seed in their front yard, and it doesn't grow bigger than this. And so what they do once a year at the end of the year is they harvest the thyme in their front yard and they sell it to Phoenix Herbs downtown. And that's their front yard. And they don't have to water. They don't have to apply fertilizers. It's just thyme. And it gets pink and white and red flowers on them. And it's gorgeous as a front yard. And you can walk on it and it smells incredible when you walk on it. And it's very, very tolerant and it spreads. But hey, take over all my grass. I don't need it anyway. Let's go kick some grass. So I think it's a great way just to replace easy stuff. The third thing you can use is what's called eco-grass. Eco-grass is just a hybrid prairie grass that was native here in the Midwest. You can buy bulk eco-grass seed from a place called Blue Moon Nursery online. Very inexpensive. It's going to be the same price as a lower end Kentucky bluegrass or a ryegrass or something. So it's a very inexpensive, but it doesn't grow any taller than this. That's at its full length and height. It grows that tall and it just stops growing for the season. But it has about 10 different types of very thin grasses in it. Don't have to water it. You just kind of let it go, do its thing. It doesn't do as well if you're on the top of a hill, I found. But for those of us that live at the bottom of the hill, our houses are in a valley, you have damp spots in your yard, it thrives. And you just don't have to mow it. So I love using that stuff. It's from Prairie Moon Nursery is an online retailer that has it called Eco-Grass. Prairie Moon. Yeah.
How is that for like animal feed if you're running like rabbit traps?
I haven't tried it, to be honest. I haven't tried it. It's a native prairie blend of grasses, so I'm assuming that it's going to be okay. More for the rabbits. The chickens and the poultry will enjoy it better once they get seed heads, but this doesn't go to seed in that way. So you're not going to get the long seed tufts on the top. So it stays looking like a front yard. But it takes a lot of wear and tear. So if you have children, it's a great thing to put down if you have spots where kids like to play a lot. Letter B under taking areas out of maintenance. Shrubs and bushes. One of the most common in our area is what's called a yew bush. It's those pine bushes out front that everybody has to prune every single year. Some of them get the red berries on them that are amazingly poisonous for dogs, for humans. They used it in World War I and World War II to poison their enemies, because if you boil this and you add it to someone's water, it will kill them and they'll have almost no symptoms up to the point of death. So yew is this wonderful plant that we plant here. Why? Because it's virtually indestructible. It just doesn't die. It stays green all the time. So we've started just replacing the yew bushes with other stuff that just looks pretty and is very, very low. I'm all about low to no maintenance, because even low maintenance is a lot of work to do low maintenance. So I like the no maintenance couple that I use. I use elderberry a lot because you can train an elderberry bush to be in the shape of a tree, a shrub, a bush. You can let it grow in whatever way that you want. If you just let it go, it's a great hedge along the back of your house instead of those wild honey locusts or just those wild shrubs that grow here so prolifically. So elderberry grows great here. Elderberry is not one you can eat right off the bush. You can eat a handful or two, but if you eat more than that, it's going to give you some digestive problems. However, elderberry, if you cook it or boil it, make it into a preserve, fantastic immune system booster. The birds love it. The flowers of elderberry are these massive white sets and blossoms. You can cut them in the house. You can make an elderberry wine, or if you're a home brewer, you can do like a beer with the elderberry flowers. I use a lot of the serviceberry, like I said before, and golden currants are great here. It's in the same family as a gooseberry that we all grew up poking ourselves with when we were kids in the woods. There's no spines on them. They get these vanilla scented yellow flowers this time of year, and they are so juicy and so sweet. You don't get the sour, and bitter taste It's called golden currant. It's a native here, and you can probably go to the woods and get them. And I know Phil Robertson has them down at Crit Site down the road in Belton. And for his about this size plant, I think it's about $6. You know, if you go to a greenhouse and buy them, I was at Suburban the other day. For one currant, it was $24.99. So I would go for the $6 unless you just really like, you know. It's called Crit Site, Critsite. It's in Belton, just off the Highway Y, I think it is. Take a left. You can see a big big windmill on the side. Crit Site, Site. Yep. Number 3, transition some of your trees. Now, I'm not a proponent of just chopping them down to chop them down, unless it's those stupid sweet gum trees with those spiky ball things on them. It's like the punishment of God, or not God. So try transitioning some. Planting apple trees or pear trees. Nut trees grow great here. Precocious pecans are a great one. I'm all about buying things wholesale, which takes some time to get them in. My wholesaler for my fruit trees and my nut trees is out of Michigan, which they're growing. Climate is close enough for us. It's called Oikos, Oikos. Oikos, and they do bare root shipments. So what you would pay for a nut tree from them is about $6 or $7 for the same size at an average greenhouse for $14 to $30 depending on the variety you're looking for. So it's about quarter to half of the price that you would pay anywhere else. But it's called Oikos. It's a small kind of family-owned farm and business, so it does take a little while to get there sometimes because they dig it up and they ship it. They are shipping now this time of year, so it's a great time to order bare root because it's just starting to bud out. Another one that grows great here is mulberry. Great for pies, jams, preserves. Our students at the school pick them off the trees and they do war paint on their faces and pretend like they're either Native Americans or orcs, depending on what team that you happen to be on. We have a lot of Tolkien fans, so they're putting it on their hands and doing, down the side of their face. And the funny thing is with the mulberries, it turns green on your face, on your skin, and it doesn't come off right away. So for 2 days, the elementary kids will come into school with these green stripes down their face. And it's like, what do you do at this school? Well, we let them play outside, and it works, actually. It works really well. So mulberries grow great here. You can grow them in a shrub. You can grow them in a tree. It just depends on how you cut it, how you chop it, or if you kill it as a tree, you let it grow back as a bush. I did that with one at my house a couple years ago.
The Missouri Conservation people also have native nut trees to Missouri for very little.
Where do you get yours at?
If you get the Missouri Conservation magazine, I think you can pick them up at the Mid-Continent
Wow,
Library.
that's awesome.
They have a place where you can write to them, and they have all the native nut trees.
Yeah.
For Missouri, you can get.
That's really inexpensive.
It's a little,
Oh, that's awesome.
starting, but it's
Yeah.
very little.
And it's very easy even to go get your own. I started a lot of nut trees the last couple years just by going in the park and grabbing some that had fallen to the ground and trying to get them before the squirrels get them is the harder part. But it's really easy and free to do the foraging. So if you turn the page, just about 15 more minutes and we'll be wrapped up. Replace your hybrids and annual flowers with edibles and some the perennial medicinals. Not all of them, because I really like some of my annual flowers. I think they look great. But simple little shifts, like instead of buying pansies, doing some perennial violas that look almost exactly the same, little bit smaller faces on the flowers, but many of them will grow back in your gardens. In fact, a lot of kale in Missouri will grow back in your gardens. If you add some compost around it or some mulch around it, probably half of my kale from last year came back, and they're gigantic in my garden at the moment. So just replacing little things along the way is a big help. Finding reseeding plants are ones that spread fairly easily. One that I love from Missouri is called lemon balm. Lemon balm is an aromatic herb that you can make into a tea, smells like lemon, but you can also use it like as a poultice. What is it good for? Lemon balm is great for insomnia, for stress and stress relief. Just tastes really good and really nice. But it's a great pollinator as well. So you can plant it around your fruit trees. It'll spread a little bit. I have a spot about yay big, about 2.5 feet across, where mine just continues to grow and reseeds itself every year. It's very thick and very dense. Now, lemon balm, if you go buy a bag of it at a store, can cost you upwards of $30 for a bag. I had about that much in my bags, which, I mean, could have sold for $300 probably, but I'd eat it all winter long, make teas, and it just makes for great midwinter warm-ups and treats. And then I let it hang in my kitchen so it looks cool at the same time. Yeah. How do you preserve it? I just cut mine off in little clusters with stems about like this, and I hang it from the ceiling, and I just let it dry. Once it's dried, you can either crush it up and put it in bags or in mason jars. I just let mine be like in a window and just crunch it off in my tea bag when I'm ready to use it. So yeah, it's really easy. You don't have to do any drying racks or anything with it. It's really simple. Some perennials that I really like. I love going with native pollinators. Echinacea purpurea, which is a purple coneflower, is a great one that grows here. Echinacea you've probably seen here at Vaughn's store. Echinacea is a great immune system booster. The root is the most dense nutrients that you can find in it, but any part of the plant can be made into a tea. I also found out last year that crushing it up into a poultice, putting a Band-Aid on it, saved my life from a brown recluse spider bite. So it actually really does work. I did have a nurse that was watching me at the same time, so I'm not one of those flaky idiots. But it really did work. It worked fantastic, actually. Number 5, learn to stack plants in layers that go together. It's called planting guilds, or little companion planting. Plants like friends. They don't like to be planted alone in nice, neat rows. They love friends. They love growing together with things that are different than them. Just like how you and I would thrive better with people that are slightly different than us. Plants work the same way. I would kill people if they were exactly like me. I'm way too obsessive compulsive, and if they want it their way and I want it mine, it's just not going to work. I need balance to the force. So it's the same way in nature. So the most common one for me right now is with apple trees. I started growing apple trees at our school. We put in 33 apple trees a couple years ago. It's been a blast, and we have planting guilds around our apple trees, some that benefit the tree, some that are medicinal for us. So the ones that we use fennel and dill around the tree. One, because those aromatic herbs around any fruit tree, pear, apple trees, plums, are great insect deterrents. Insects hate the smell of that stuff. It keeps them away. The fennel and the dill are great pollinators. So they bring in these incredible wasps that will actually lay eggs inside the other bad insects. They become zombie caterpillars. It's this great thing online you can read about. Protects your tomatoes. We plant comfrey, and we do echinacea, purple coneflower. Why purple coneflower? It's medicinal. Do we use it all the time? Rarely. To be honest, it just looks really pretty and it's hard to kill. And the kids love picking purple coneflower because it's pretty and it's pink. And so our purple coneflower, we needed something at the school that was going to be hardy because we have pre-kindergartners that every day when they go on walks, they're grabbing flowers for their teachers, and usually they get roots in their flowers because they pull up the whole thing. They don't know how to pick it yet. But in the yard, it's really easy to use it as well because you get these beautiful blooms that last from about mid-May up until the very last frost of the year. So it's a very long, prolific blooming flower. And then I leave mine over the winter because the finches, the little yellow and black birds, love to sit on the seed heads and eat them in my garden. So I just let my purple coneflower stay and I cut it back one time in the spring. So that's my apple tree guild. Now you can do vegetable garden guilds like the tomatoes with nasturtiums. Carrots are great to plant around your tomatoes because that carrot root goes down deep into the soil, and then it helps break up that root mass around the base of the tomato. Basil goes really well with them because it's an aromatic herb that keeps away aphids and mites and some of those tomato hornworms. Those are those nasty demonic looking horned things that appear on your tomatoes. They don't sting you, by the way, they just make weird noises. And so the tomato guilds not only repel the bad insects, but it brings good things in. It brings in the beneficial insects. It helps repair the soil. And there's really easy things that you can plant that will actually repair the soil. One of the ones that I'm planting now quite a bit of is a Japanese pagoda tree. It has the similar leaves to a locust tree without the spiny things that look like a crown of thorns coming off of them. These are great to plant because they actually repair nitrogen that's in the soil. They get little nodules on the roots that add nitrogen into the soil. Nitrogen is the best thing to use when you're trying to make something green and grow faster. So black locust will do, honey locust will do, even beans and legumes. Planting beans in areas of your yard that you want to fertilize itself, plant legumes. Plant peas, and then when you pick your plants at the end of the season, or you pick your pods, end of the season, chop them and drop them and let them go. And all that nitrogen will just go back to the soil. Now the Japanese pagoda tree gets these gorgeous big flower blooms on them in the springtime. This is only 1 year old, so this one is pretty young for us. So if somebody wants it, you can just come up and grab it afterwards. You're more than welcome to. And so that's a beautiful one here because of the pollination. Honeybees love it, and it does repair the soil in your yard. So number 6 in your notes, plant along every edge in succession and look to grow vertically. So in most ecosystems, the edges are the most fertile and the most has the most fruit. So if you look at the woods, I'm a hunter, I'm from Michigan. So when you look at the woods, the areas along the edge of the woods where the woods meet the field is where the most berry bushes, fruit trees, pollinators, it's where most of the life is at along the edges. The reason why is because in the middle of the forest, the sun is almost completely sheltered out, so a lot of those berry bushes don't get the sunlight that they need, but it's too harsh in the field. So if it lives on the edge, that's where the most fruit actually comes from. Think of your gardens the same way. So instead of having these nice clean rows, I take a lot of seeds and I'll sprinkle my smaller ones in the front, and I'll sprinkle some of my medium-sized ones in the middle, then I'll do some of my taller ones in the back, and you get this kind of slope effect on in your flower beds where it's solid vegetation instead of areas where the weeds can grow up in between. And so on those edges, try planting something. So on the very edges of your flower bed where you don't have anything growing for 6 inches, try thyme or oregano or some of those creeping herbs like marjoram, or try in the medium areas, try lemon balm, try some of the nasturtiums or kale, and stack those functions together and create your garden to be one giant edge. Now, if you live in a smaller apartment or a smaller yard, start in a pot, but think tall in the middle, like a tomato that's going to grow up, like an indeterminate tomato that will grow up. And then around the next layer, maybe do carrots, because the carrots are going to get about yay tall, the greens on the top, and then some nasturtiums around the edge. So you got your tall, your medium, and then your small ones at the bottom. And think, how can you grow up? One of the easy ways to do it if you have fruit trees is to try growing climbing beans up your fruit trees. It's a free trellis. And it just happens to be that when the fruit tree needs the nitrogen, the beans are releasing nitrogen into the soil. So it's free fertilizer. And it's really easy for kids to come pick those beans. And if they happen to kill the whole plant, then you just let it fall and it's free fertilizer again. So it's a really easy system that you've already got growing, that little apple tree or pear tree or nut tree. Try planting beans or climbing peas around the base and grow vertically. Number 7, don't be afraid to get kids involved. If you don't have children, invite the neighbor kids over. And be okay with your gate getting left open, with flowers getting trampled, with all of that stuff. But I promise you, it will be worth it. It'll be worth it for you, but you're also cultivating a life that loves to be outside. We are far too good at training our kids to be in front of screens of every size, shape, kind. We're really good at getting our kids in front of those. Go outside. Teach them to ride bikes like you did in your neighborhood growing up, or go into the woods. And moms and dads, be okay if they get lost a little bit and they don't come back until dark. I remember the rule that my parents had was, if those street lights come on and you are not home, you are in trouble. But they don't know where I'm going during the daytime. We wandered the woods forever. Now, anymore, we're afraid to let our kids leave the front yard. Don't be so afraid. They will be okay, just like you were okay going into the woods. They will find their way home. And if not, I mean, let's just be realistic. Most of our Kansas City neighborhoods are like this big anyway. So you can find them. It's real easy, you know, but start small. Let them go into the woods for 20 minutes into the backyard. Trust them to go to the park, but get them outside. Get them in the garden. Get them grounded and connected back with nature. Number 8, increase wildlife of all types, whether it's birds, it's insects, it's mammals, whatever it happens to be, increase the wildlife. If you don't know where to start, plant a flower that they like and watch them come. It's the field of dreams concept. If you build it, they will come. I promise you. You don't need to go buy bees for your backyard. Just attract all the bees that your neighbors are neglecting and they will come. I promise you. Because what most people do is we plant these sterile hybrids that don't attract bees anyway. Plant echinacea. You will have so many incredible bees. Now what's fun is the ones that are attracted to your perennials are not usually the stinging type. They're honeybees that are very docile, that you can go like this and just brush them off your arm and they'll go away. But by planting the right stuff, we increase the wildlife in our backyards. Even just bringing the birds in, start feeding the birds in your backyard, because when they come, you'll notice they go to the bathroom all over your deck. So instead of putting your bird feeder on your deck, move it out a little bit so they're fertilizing around your garden. Or put them on the edges of the yard and put bird houses on the edge of the yard, because it's insect control and it's free and they're already there. So just let the nature come. Stop fighting them and trying to get rid of them. Yeah.
What if you were to put a bird feeder in the center of your garden?
You can. I would not recommend using sunflowers. Sunflowers, the shell has a chemical constituent that actually prohibits growth around the base. So you'll notice around anyone that feeds sunflowers, you have a big dead spot in the grass. It's just because of that chemical being released. Planting sunflowers in the garden will do the same thing. Nothing will grow around the base of a sunflower. So if you do, use Niger or thistle or sunflower that's just the hearts that doesn't have the shell. Sunflower hearts will not have the same chemical constituent effect on the soil. So you can do it in the garden. I like mine right on the edges of my garden. Mine's on the edge of my deck, right over my flower bed, so it brings the birds in, and I get incredible birds. I'm a huge bird nerd, so I got 9 feeders in my yard, and it's my morning quiet time and coffee. So number 9, trade with friends, trade with neighbors. If you've got something, trade it. Cut it in half and trade it with somebody else. And whether that is a resource, it's a concept, it's an idea, give it away. What are you gonna do with it anyway? I mean, worst case scenario is you say, hey, I've got all these plants in my backyard, you bring yours over, dig them up, and usually they'll do it. They'll do all the work for you and give you a couple of theirs from their yard. Really, really easy. And even at our school, we have dozens of families every year that go, oh, what is that? How do I get some of that? Bring a spade and go dig it up and take it home and plant it in your yard and then share it with somebody else and pass it on. Don't be afraid to share, because it's about building those long-lasting connections. And number 10, get connected with other people who are just as nerdy as you are and love the same things, because you can share resources, you share supplies, you share ideas, you laugh together. The worst case scenario is you have them over to your house, you feed them some of the stuff that you grew in your garden, and then they never come over again. That's the worst case scenario, and that's not that bad. It's really not that bad of a scenario. Best case scenario, you make a friend. And in any community, that's a necessary building block way more than lettuce, kale, or nasturtiums, is building lifelong connections, because that's real wellness. So if you want to get connected, there's a couple Instagram, Facebook, Twitter stuff that's at the bottom. Our school and I are actually going to be hosting a month-long permaculture course over the summer, where you can, in a couple days a week, get your permaculture design certification with the Permaculture Research Institute out of Australia's stamp of approval on it. So if you are interested, just follow one of those social media things. In the next couple of weeks, you'll see how you can sign up to become a certified permaculturist in your area. So thanks so much for having me. You're welcome to take our kindergartners' heirloom tomatoes or the Japanese pagoda tree. And then don't forget, there's some free compost out there for first come, first serve. So thanks so much. Bless you guys.